بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So today, inshallah, we'll start with the theory of this course. As I explained last time, the course will be divided into two sections. There'll be the theory, and then there'll be the practice. I'll do the theory, inshallah, in maybe, hopefully, nothing more than 6 sessions. I hope I can keep it to that, inshallah. And then we'll have a similar number of sessions that will be more based on practice. We'll be pairing up in groups, and we'll be working together, inshallah, in different ways. So today we'll start with bi'idhnillahi ta'ala the delivery. The theory, we'll start with delivery. The theory will be delivery, part of it will be content, and then part of it will be Jum'ah specifics. Meaning there'll be a session or two where I'll just talk about specific things for Jumu'ah in opposition to other forms of public speaking where the rules of Jumu'ah don't really apply. So today we'll start with delivery. Now, this is called the Albert Murabian's 7:38:55 rule. You can look it up and you can read the article, and you can read, there was actually some books that were written after that around this. If you take a look here, you'll see that what this is, in order for you to capture the attention of the audience, this is what this rule is talking about. Capturing the attention of your audience. What aspects of public speaking play into capturing the attention of the audience? Now, what I want you to look at is the word content. So look at the content. It's responsible for 7% only. 7% only. That's it. That's why scholars of the highest level, ulama, who are speaking about issues that are so deep and so important, don't really have an audience. I can direct you to YouTube series online for scholars that are talking about issues that can blow your mind, but no one listens to them because it's not about content. Content only contributes 7% to actually being able to capture the audience. 55% is body language. And we'll talk about that. And then vocal presentation is 38%, which is what we'll talk about today. Today we're going to talk about vocal presentation, inshallah. And then next time we'll dive into body language a little bit. But this is the very scary part. We're going to talk about content because it still matters. But really, when you're capturing the attention of your audience, the content only plays a 7% role, which is a problem. In what way? If you have good content, let's say you have excellent content. You're saying things that need to be heard. People have to learn what you're saying. But then all this here doesn't work for you. You don't have the proper vocal presentation. You don't have good body language. No one's going to listen. And people aren't going to be interested. This is why this is so important to understand, to learn how to do public speaking, so that if you actually have content, and that's why clowns are, guys who have nothing to say. Well, people have nothing to say. It's just garbage. But they know how to stand, they know how to smile, they know how to speak, they know how to play with their voices, and people watch them. Millions and millions of views. And when you actually look, what did they say? What was the content? Nothing. The content was nothing. Not even good jokes even. But this is the reality. This is just a study. There's a number of studies that were done after this that have similar numbers. You may find small variations that are different in terms of the numbers, but in general, this is what the rule looks like, which I think is something worth noting here. So today, inshallah, we'll talk a little bit about vocal presentation. There are 4 bad vocalizations. If you're always high, if you're always up here, all the time, the whole time, it doesn't work. If you're always up there the whole time, people will stop listening to you. They can't. If you're going through your feed on Facebook and someone speaks like that, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, you move on. Even if they're saying something important, it's because it's hard to listen to. There's nothing to do with volume. This is issue of your voice, the tone. It's characteristic of your voice, not the volume of the voice that I'm talking about here. If you're always high, people don't want to listen. If you're always low, if you're continuously low, too deep all the time, people don't want to listen to that either. Now, what we're going to talk about is how you're going to use both. How you're going to go up and down a little bit, depending on what you're saying, depending on what you're trying to emphasize, what you want people to hear, how you want to affect them. So yes, you're going to go up, you're going to be high sometimes, and you're going to be low sometimes. But you can't be one all the time. These are bad vocalizations to hold on to. Too loud. I am 100% guilty of that. 100% too loud. 100%. It's wrong. You shouldn't be too loud. You shouldn't you get passionate, so you start yelling, and then you yell for 7, 8 minutes, and then you recognize that the khutbah's over, and you're still yelling. You shouldn't. You can be loud for a few moments to capture people's attention, but you can't continuously be loud. You have to bring it down. Too sharp. If you're too sharp, and this is an issue this is more a technical issue, meaning where you're carrying the microphone. If the microphone's a bit too close, or if the volume is played within a certain way, so the sound is very sharp. If it's too sharp, people don't enjoy listening to it. You know that whenever it makes that sound, they kind of cringe for a moment, even yourself. If it's too sharp, then that's a problem as well. These are just bad vocalizations that you kind of want to watch out for. You don't want to fall into any of these traps. All right. So here's some rules regarding vocalization. First of all, speed. Now, if you think I'm a fast speeder now, you should have seen me 10, 15 years ago. I was like a machine gun. It was just a machine gun, where the point where I had people say, no, in the middle of my talk, they wouldn't wait until I was done. Now they wait. They wait until I'm finished, come to me after, and say, especially the older ammos who are tired of life, and they just don't have that. So they say, ya ibni, ala mahlak. That's fine, but before, when I did this, when I was younger, I was so fast that people would stop me in the middle. I was, no, stop, we understood nothing. You have to go back and repeat everything again. So I would go back. So this is, again, you can't, maybe there are some perfect public speakers out there. I'm definitely not one of them. But you can learn the rules. You can learn to observe those rules and try to improve yourself as you go along, get better, fix the mistakes slowly. And sometimes you'll be stuck with something. It'll turn into your persona later. And those who enjoy it will continue to listen to you, and those who don't enjoy it will kind of move on. It's not a problem. But speed is important. Speed allows you to control certain things. Did I talk about that a little bit? Yeah. So let's talk about it here. In general, slow is better than fast. As a general rule of thumb, if you are stuck between the two, the slow is always better. If you're slower, it's better. People will enjoy that more. They'll be able to understand you better. The problem with slow is that you can't deliver all of your content. Most of the time, slow means that you're not going to get through 15 to 30% of what you actually came to talk about. And sometimes your brain is moving forward, and you're trying to slow it down. If you slow down the way you talk, you slow down your thought process, and you start forgetting things. So it becomes difficult. It's not easy to control the speed of your words, because when you're controlling the speed of your words, you're also controlling the speed of your brain in processing what it wants to talk about. So it's not easy. But in general, if you are stuck between being too quick or too slow, slow is general. And I'm fully guilty of this, so you don't have to tell me later, I know. Second point, where does speed become important? When it comes to emphasis. So when you're telling a story, you don't tell the story with the same speed. If it's all the same speed, people don't know what you're interested in. They don't care, they're not sure what point of the story you're trying to bring forward. So you need to kind of jog through the parts that don't matter that much now. They're important for context, but they don't matter that much. You find that in the Quran, by the way. Go and take Qissat Musa anywhere in the Quran. You'll find that each time in different surahs, the qissa or the story will emphasize a certain part of the story that won't be emphasized in another surah. The point being, all of the elements of the story will still be there. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will talk about Musa speaking to Fir'aun in 50 verses if it's important, or in 2 verses if he just wants to make sure you understand the context that happened, and then move on to the point that's after that. So even the Quran does this all the time. If this is not the point of the story, it'll give you 2 or 3 verses, and then it'll move on to the actual point of the story. But it won't completely remove it. So I'm not saying that you don't tell the part of the story that is not important to you. You just have to make sure you're a bit quicker in going through it. And then when you come to the part of the story that actually matters, you slow down. And you emphasize each word. And you can think of any story if you want, and you can come and you can do that quickly in your head. Especially when you, for example, narrate a hadith to the Prophet, for the Prophet ﷺ. And you see the Prophet ﷺ went somewhere and did something with someone, and you're doing it very quickly, and then someone asked him something, and this is what he said, ﷺ, and you slow down. And you say the words that he said ﷺ very clearly, because that's the point of the story that you want people to think about. Doesn't mean that first part isn't important. It's just you're actually directing people's attention to what you want, to the point of your story, or else people won't understand. Meaning, They'll hear a story and they'll go home and say, I heard a story today, but they really won't know why they heard that story that day. They're not sure I don't know why he told the story. Unless your speed changes throughout the story, it's difficult for those who are listening to figure out what point matters to you. Because you can take a story and have like maybe 8 to 10 points that are really important, that are very, very deep, that are worthy of talking about. Which part of that story is important for you right now? Your speed will make a difference. It'll emphasize something if you're a bit slower. Repetition. Repetition can be helpful. We know for a fact that the Prophet ﷺ repeated himself 3 times, right? And he didn't do it. Sometimes we think sometimes what we think is that the Prophet ﷺ would repeat himself in the same way. And he would just say the same thing in the same way 3 times. And that's not what he did, ﷺ. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I'll just say something in English and show you how. So if I'm talking about something that's, in my opinion, important, and at the end I say this. I say, let me think of something good. Okay, just something random here. This will affect your behavior. This will affect your behavior. Think what you want, but this will definitely affect your behavior. So that's repeating 3 times. Just something random. It's repeating 3 times. That wasn't the same. It's not saying, this will affect your behavior, this will affect your behavior, this will affect your behavior. 3 times, I'm done. No, alayhi salatu never did that. When he repeated himself 3 times, it wasn't just for the fact of repeating himself. Even when he did salam, it's not assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum. No, it's assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum. So the repetition was there, but the repetition was actually functional. It did something. It was there for a reason. It helped people understand what the point was of what was happening. So the Prophet ﷺ, when you find in the hadith, وَكَرَّرَهَا ثَلَاثًا, which is everywhere in his hadith, he would repeat things 3 times. It wasn't just a repetition. He would do it in a way where each time he would get people to think about what he said a little bit more, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he was very good at doing this. So repetition is helpful. And you'll find good public speakers, they will find ways, they'll find a sentence that means something to them, that's important. And they will repeat that sentence throughout their routine or throughout their talk multiple times, different ways, trying to get you to memorize that one sentence. Because if you memorize that sentence, they've achieved their goal. They got you to hold on, to retain something that they were interested in you learning and actually thinking about. That's regarding speed. So that's the first point we're going to talk about. Is speed is important. Repetition is a part, especially if you're quick like me, then you need to repeat yourself a few times when you're talking, definitely. Second rule regarding vocalizing emotions. This is very important, vocalizing emotions. Your voice has to reflect the emotion that you are trying to relay to people. If your voice doesn't reflect the emotion, it can be very, very awkward and very weird. And if it's the opposite emotion, or it doesn't make sense, people won't know how to deal with it. So when you're sad, your voice has to reflect that sadness. You have to come down a little bit. If you're saying the Prophet ﷺ, he lost his son Ibrahim, he looked at him, and he couldn't help himself from crying. He just couldn't help it. And then with your voice, you come down, and you give some space. Because that's how sadness is kind of related to people. You can't force sadness on people you calm down, you bring it down, and you phase out the words. That's how you kind of make sure. Again, you're reflecting your own emotion in what you're trying to say, but that's how sadness comes forward. You give people a moment to kind of think about what was being said. If you're loud when you're sad, we'll talk about that. There are people who are loud when they're sad. They're on that minbar and they're crying and they're yelling and they're trying to make you sad with them. It's done. I don't think it's right, but it's done. It's playing on emotions. It's turning the content from logical to emotional. And we'll talk about that when we talk about content. But if you're trying to vocalize sadness, that's how it's done. You just kind of come down, you slow down. When it comes to anger, anger is one of the more difficult ones to vocalize. You want to vocalize anger. Loudness is usually what is used. Meaning you become a bit loud, right? And you become a bit sharp. And you become a bit abrupt in the way you're going to say something. If you're talking about the Prophet ﷺ, when he came and he found them fighting over something that is racist, فقال فغضب رسول الله فقال دعوها فإنها منتنة. That's how you say it. Leave it. This is disgusting. And then everything kind of starts together. So the sound, your voice, you have to go up. You have to go up. Your voice has to become a bit loud. It has to be a bit abrupt. It has to be direct. If anger is going to come across, that's how it's going to happen. That's why the khutbah, again, we'll talk about that during Jum'ah a little bit. What is the most known thing for Jum'ah? Is that usually khutbah are pretty angry. Because the Prophet ﷺ had a persona on the minbar where his voice was loud and he looked angry. The reason being that he was talking about something that was usually very critical, very difficult, and he was trying to get a response of people to be a bit more, meaning he wanted the level of preparation to be high. He wanted everyone to be ready, instead of being just laid back, especially on a Jum'ah minbar. He doesn't want you to be laid back. He wants you to be listening, focused, and ready for change. That's the whole point of Jum'ah to begin with. Happiness. Happiness in the voice means you're going to go up high a little bit. Sadness, you go down. Happiness, you go high. We'll talk about the facial expressions and the kind of the body language later. But in happy, you have to kind of go up. It was a great day. It was beautiful. So you go up a little bit. And that kind of makes, again, people don't even necessarily need to understand what you're saying. I remember there was a good public speaker, I won't name the person, controversial individual, that my mother used to listen to when I was young. I used to listen to all the time. And my mom used to listen to with me. My mom, for a long time, didn't understand Arabic clearly, especially if the person is speaking in an accent. That's not the accent that we have in our little village. It's hard for her to comprehend. So I remember she would watch this person with me every time I watched. I asked her, are you understanding anything that he's saying? She said, no, but it's clear to me what he's talking about. Just with the ups and downs of his voice, you can figure out, I think I hear a few words here and there. And then just the usage of voice you can come across to the person that's listening to you. And that is the power of good public speaking, that if your body language, your vocalizations, all that is intact, that even if the person who's listening to you doesn't understand the language 100%, they can still get across what you're trying to say. And they can walk away saying, I think I got what they're trying to teach. So happiness, you kind of go up a little bit, and that's how you get it. Mockery. Mockery is a problem. Mockery, you want that voice where you say, so you're telling me that you wanted to do that and didn't? See, that's mockery. That's kind of that's mocking someone or being a bit cynical. Or having a bit of sarcasm, as the narration goes, that they came to Nuh alayhi salam when he was building the ship. فقالوا يا نوح صرت نجارا بعد أن كنت نبيا. You were a prophet, now you've turned into a carpenter. That's what's going on with you. So mockery, or being cynical or being a bit sarcastic, it also needs a certain playing with your voice in order for that to come across. One of the worst things that you can do in public speaking is use sarcasm or mockery, not vocalize it properly, and people not understand what you just did. Because it's the opposite of what you're trying to do. Mockery and sarcasm is actually the opposite of the message. So if people don't get it, if they think that you actually meant it, and this happened to me once. This happened to me actually more than once. But in my recent years, happened once. And the person can actually come up and ask you, why would you say that about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What I was saying was, it was during a time where they had, they were mocking, or they had made those drawings about him, saying things. So I was saying, and then they come along and they say that the Prophet ﷺ somehow is pushing for terrorism and trying to get people killed. And it's obviously sarcasm, it's obviously mockery, it's obviously being upset. But sometimes your audience won't understand it. And they'll think that that's what you just tried to explain. And they'll come and say, well, why would you say that in the minbar? So it's very dangerous. Using mockery, using sarcasm, being cynical, it's helpful. It's a strong public speaking tool to use, but it's very dangerous as well. So if you feel like you can't pull it off, then just don't go down that line. And you have to make sure that vocalization part of it is very clear. So if you're someone who's cynical all the time, what happens is your regular voice is your cynical voice. If you're always being sarcastic, then you stop using vocalization for your sarcasm because that's how you speak all the time. You can't do that when you're doing public speaking. Your sarcasm has to be vocalized differently so people can recognize. This is his tone when he's talking normally and explaining things, and this is his tone when he becomes sarcastic, so they can see that, they can differentiate and actually appreciate what you just did. Questions. Obviously, a question should be vocalized differently. I don't think I need to give you an example of that, but whenever there's a question, ماذا فعلت? What did you do? It's a question. There's you kind of go up high at the end, at the last bit of it there, just to make sure that people understand that this was a question intended. And even when you read the Quran, by the way, scholars would tell us to do the same thing. It's hard to do when you're reciting in salawat, but we were told to do it. I've never been able to actually pull it off because in the Quran it's a bit more tricky. But even in the Quran, whenever it's a question, you're actually supposed to vocalize it as if it is a question, which is وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ. Right? How do you kind of make sure that comes off as a question? It's a bit hard. It needs some vocalization. Some people don't appreciate it, so we don't do it. But scholars in the past would ask us to actually do that. Surprisement. Being surprised. This is a very powerful tool. Whenever if you're building up your story properly, and there's a lot of suspense in it, you want that moment when someone is being surprised, or you're being surprised, or you want the audience to be surprised, that your vocalization has to reflect that. It has to be an abrupt change in the tone and volume and nature of your voice in order for that to come in. It doesn't have to be loud and sharp. It could be the opposite. But there has to be an abrupt change. There has to be something different in order for surprisement to actually come across. It's a very, very powerful tool. If you use it properly, it will literally make your whole speech. Meaning you can fail on a lot of other things, but if you can get that one thing done properly within your talk, then people will actually remember that, and it'll stay with them. That's in terms of kind of getting emotions across. Clarity. Clarity is a big deal, especially for us here, where you're speaking to people who actually have English as a second language most of the time. Or when you're saying something in Arabic, and Arabic is not the native language for the majority of people who are listening to you. So clarity is important. There are two aspects of clarity that are important: enunciations and pronunciations. Enunciation means just to be clear. Make sure that every letter that you say is coming out properly. You're not eating off the last letter. We have a joke that we have people in our country that don't say the last letters of words. So someone comes up to them and say, "Why do you chop off the last letter of every word?" So they answer in Arabic. The question is, ليش بتقطعوا آخر حرف؟ فلهم أي حرف؟ Which letter? And they actually chop off the last letter of the word letter itself. So it is something that people do. Being clear, making sure that every letter is coming out clearly is important. That's why tajweed, you learn the Quran. Really what you're learning is, you're learning a bit of the science of linguistics, and you're learning how to make sure that when you say something, it is heard clearly, that each letter is clear. Pronunciation is different. Pronunciation is focusing on the emphasis in a word. I remember when I first came here. It was like 6 or 7 years ago. Every time I give a khutbah, I would sit with Muhammad Hamu, and he would tell me all the words that I said wrong. I had the word, but I just didn't know how to say it right. I hadn't said it in years. I forgot how it's supposed to be pronounced. So pronunciation is important, to make sure that you're saying the word properly, or at least saying it in a way that the people who are listening to you are used to. Because sometimes there's a word that is pronounced differently in different cultures. So you make sure you say it in a way that they can actually understand it. So both enunciation and pronunciation are extremely important. Sometimes just having those two things can carry you as a public speaker for many, many years. Meaning you may not have all the other tools or skills. Maybe the skill set doesn't really work for you. But if you can enunciate and pronunciate, meaning people are hearing everything you're saying very clearly, they're not guessing at what that word was or guessing what that word meant because it wasn't clear, then that can take you far. So it's an important skill to kind of hold on to. That's in terms of clarity. Tone is the last. Tone. Monotonic. Being monotonic is probably the most annoying thing in the world. If you have someone who stands there and speaks in the same way the whole time for an hour and a half, never changes a word, never goes up, never goes down, within a couple of seconds, it's hard to sit. It's hard to sit. And that's one of the reasons I believe that people fall asleep in Jumu'ah, all around the globe, being the fact that sometimes, many of our khatibs can be monotonic for a long period of time. You can't be monotonic for more, this is the rule, for more than 10 to 15 seconds. And then you have to change your tone. You have to go up or down. You have to change something. You cannot continue with the same tone for more than 15 seconds, because at that point, if you continue, people will get bored. And you'll lose everyone's attention. They won't be listening to you anymore after that. So I think 10 to 15 seconds is what most researchers in this field talk about as the longest period of time where you can be speaking in one tone. I believe that not even one sentence should be delivered in one tone. I think you should always be changing your tone the whole time. Within one sentence, you're going up and down all the time. That's how you emphasize. That's how you get people to continue to listen to you and wonder what's coming next and think about what you just said. You shouldn't say anything monotonic. But if you are someone who tends to be a bit monotonic, make sure it's no longer than 10, 15 seconds, and then find a way to actually step it up or step it down a little bit. Do not exaggerate changes. This is probably this bothers me the most out of all the mistakes that are made in public speaking. Is exaggeration of tone change. Meaning, whether you're trying to vocalize an emotion or you're trying to get people's attention, so you make sounds, or you change your tone in a way that is obviously not genuine. What you're going to find in this whole series is that really a good public speaker is a public speaker who is natural when they're talking. I mean, they're being as normal and as natural as they can. They're not forced to act or be something that they're not. People pick up on lack of genuinity immediately. If someone's not genuine, you feel it, you hear it. It's just a part of who we are. If you feel someone's non-genuine, you don't listen anymore. If you feel like they're acting, if you feel this is not real, if you feel there's showmanship is good, but it has to be in moderation. It has to be done. What we're actually talking about here is how to perform some showmanship so that 7% of the content actually makes its way over. That's the whole point of this, is that you learn a little bit of showmanship so that 7% can actually arrive in people's minds and hearts. But if you exaggerate the usage of these things, whether it's surprise, anger, sadness, or happiness, then people will feel that something isn't fitting, and they will take a step away. Sometimes, I'm not sure if you do this, sometimes if you're watching, and if you're going through your feed and video clips, and someone and he acts in a way that is too much for you, you feel uncomfortable, so you change. If the way that they cried, or the way that they laughed, or the way that they were performing, or the way that they spoke made you feel uncomfortable, the reason that you felt uncomfortable, if you ever wonder, why am I feeling uncomfortable? Why don't I want to continue to watch this? The reason is because you just didn't feel that they were genuine. You felt that was an exaggeration. So you can ask a question by saying what, or you can ask it by saying what. That's too much. That's like Scooby-Doo. It doesn't work anymore. It seems more theatrical. It becomes theatrical. This is not theater. Standing here, this is not theater. In theater, that's what they do. They go up and down and they exaggerate, but that's their craft. That's what people are going and expecting. This is not that. When you're doing public speaking, people aren't expecting you to be theatrical unless that's the form of public speaking that you are delivering. Again, I'm catering this a little bit towards Jumu'ah and religious talks, or addressing public in a way that's trying to help them, trying to move them forward, offer them some solutions, help them change behavior, stuff like that. I'm not talking about being a stand-up comedian. If you're a stand-up comedian, things change. The rules for public speaking actually change. Being a stand-up comedian is probably the most difficult thing. It's right under Khutbah Jumu'ah in my book. It's very difficult to stand in front of a room of a couple hundred people and make them laugh. It's not an easy thing to do. However, what I'm talking to you about here, you're not going to learn to be a good stand-up comedian for what I tell you. That's not what you're going to get from me. So don't exaggerate the changes of your tones. All right. Here's some tips. Find someone to imitate. Not fully, but find someone to imitate. Meaning, watch public speakers that are good, that you've listened to in the past, when you were younger, that you enjoyed, that you felt I would like to be able to speak like that, and then watch what they do and learn from them. You have to come up with your own combo at the end. You have to have your own thing. But it's helpful to have someone that you're willing to imitate. I did that as I grew up. I had a couple of people that I tried to imitate. It's not apparent because after you imitate a little bit, learn how to do it, you end up breaking off and doing your own thing. But it's helpful if you be willing to watch and you're not listening to the content, you're just observing. You're observing how they're delivering the content, how they're doing it. And you'll start picking up on the tricks. Because I'll go through all the tricks for you, and then you'll see them, and you'll say, I like that. I like this combination. I like this recipe that this person has put forward, and then you try and imitate them. Not fully, though. It's important to make that. But I don't think that you can become a good public speaker if you don't imitate anyone, if you just start on your own. Even if the imitation is for mockery to begin with. If you learn to imitate a public speaker, then you're on the tracks. You can make some adjustments, make something genuine and original and authentic to who you are, and keep on going. Just like Quran when I was younger, or people who learn the Quran when they're young, and they don't imitate a qari, they never develop a good voice, ever. They read the Quran in a very boring way all their lives, because you have to imitate a qari, someone. You have to like someone at some point. Imitate them long enough, and then break off and do your own thing later. Every person who has a good voice in the Quran, reads well, imitated someone growing up, 100%. Yeah, it's never happened any other way. And I've had students who didn't imitate anyone, and they finished the whole Quran and became mujaz and taught, and oh my gosh, yani, not a joy to listen to at all. But again, that's an issue of, it's not as important, I guess, in the Quran, but it's very important in public speaking. Be careful of tics. I was doing, I went to that place, I've listened to people speak and use the tic, maybe 11 times in 9 seconds. Just continuously using the same, that's a problem. Watch out for tics. In Arabic, فهمت علي? فهمت علي? فهمت علي? فهمت علي? لا يا أخي ما فهمنا عليك. This repetition of the same word is a problem. Tics, some tics are okay, some tics are cute. Some tics are actually, they identify people. Some mashayikh made their own tics, and people start to know them by the tics that they have. But still, you can't overuse these things. You can't have them, these words that fill in, you don't want to have them. A good public speaker doesn't have these filling in words. Just continues to offer the content, doesn't really use them. And if they do use them, they use them for a point. I have a sheikh. My tic is I even in English do it. Sometimes it's a fully English talk, and I will insert a yani. Even in an interview for medicine, I will insert a yani somewhere into that interview, and someone will ask me, why are you yani? I'm not yani, but we'll continue. We can act like that didn't happen. We all have these tics, but you want to really become a good public speaker, start to get rid of these tics. One of our shuyukh would say na'am. When he spoke all the time, he would say something, na'am, and then na'am. So once he was praying, and he was reciting the Quran, he made a mistake, and 4 or 5 people corrected him, so he said, na'am, na'am, and then he didn't know. So we asked him after, is the salah maqboola, is it batila, what do we do? So I actually repeated Isha after that. And people weren't happy with that at all. That wasn't good. So be careful of tics when you talk. They're almost unavoidable. You can't fully avoid them, but you don't want to be a public speaker who stands there and continues to repeat the same tic because they're not sure of what they want to say. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Be diverse. Humor. But let's take a moment and let's talk about humor. The most dangerous thing in public speaking is humor. Whether you start with it or you end with it, it's a musibah if it doesn't work. If you start with humor and you bomb, that's it. You might as well say, okay, folks, salamu alaikum, and just walk yourself out because it's not going to work anymore. So starting off with a joke is very dangerous. I would never advise starting off with a joke, ever. It's just not smart. You can do it if you feel confident about what you're doing, but if you start off with a joke, you should make sure that you're very careful. And never tell people that, oh, this is a great joke. Never sell your joke before you tell your joke. Just if you're going to say it, just say it. Do not sell it by telling them, this is an amazing joke. Don't do that, because now the expectations are high, and you can completely ruin this. So don't do that. Don't end with a joke either. If you're having a great session, you're going through, you did your talk, you went through everything, and then you tell a joke and no one laughs. Allah yahdik. It's like we have a method in Arabic where you milk the cow and then the cow steps right into the sultan at the end, in the pail at the end of it. So just don't do that. Don't end with a joke unless you're ready. Jokes can be inserted inside your talk. Now, they can't be random. It can't be I'm talking about something and I say, you know what? How we take a minute? I just tell you this random joke. No, humor has to be functional. It has to be purposeful. Meaning you're saying this joke and it somehow is associated and is going to help along with your sequence of thoughts or sequence of topics. It can't be just something random, just for the sake of making people laugh. Again, we're not doing stand-up comedy here. You're trying to insert a joke that helps. Humor is a very powerful tool in public speaking. Beware. Do not joke about disabilities. Do not joke about religions. Do not joke about catastrophes. Do not joke about how people look. Do not joke about about people's weights. Do not joke about anything that, especially now in this era, that can come off as sexist, especially if you're a Muslim man. The jokes of marrying the second woman are completely off the table now, which takes away 95% of my material when it comes to jokes. That's all I've got. That's all I ever learned growing up. That's all I have. It's just those jokes where a man is with his wife and the fights they have over these things. That's all I was taught. You can't use these jokes anymore. Seriously, never touch them. Be very careful about what you joke about because, again, humor is not necessary in the form of public speaking that we're doing. I don't think it's wrong to even use humor in Jummah. I don't think it's wrong, but it has to be done well. It's very helpful. Humor it draws a smile on people's faces. They're more relaxed. They're more likely to listen to you. But it's very dangerous because if you joke about the wrong thing or your joke is misunderstood, it can ruin everything you've done. Or if the joke doesn't arrive, as I said, deliver it and people don't understand anything, then it's a complete waste of your time and you look and you feel really, really awkward after it. Wallahi. I rarely tell jokes in public speaking. But again, it is a powerful tool within public speaking. Humor is important. I want to take a moment to talk about it because I'm going to allude to humor throughout the whole series a number of times. I need you to start thinking about how you would see yourself, if you're going to do this, inshallah. How would you see yourself being a bit humorous in what you say? How? The Sahaba would sometimes talk about the Prophet ﷺ and say, we would listen to him and we would laugh and cry. They would use those terms. نَضْحَكُ وَنَبْكِي. Meaning he would make us laugh and make us cry, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the way he talked. He knew how to do that. Because both laughter and crying are emotions. People enjoy when they are capable of expressing emotions in any talk. Not in a way that is awkward, but just in a natural way, where you feel true sorrow about what you heard, but you also feel a bit happy as well. That comes from a good public speaker being able to make sure that these emotions all come naturally to those who are listening. So humor is important, but if it's not used properly, it can be catastrophic. It can really harm everything that you do. All right. Seriousness. You don't have to be like this to be serious. Your face doesn't have to look like that. You don't always have to be with a high-pitched voice, very abrupt. That's not how you can be serious. No, you can use humor and be serious. But seriousness is important. You have to make that shift. You're talking in a way where you're a bit laid back, where it's just an explanation. You're telling a story. You're talking about a situation in life. But then you want people to feel that this issue that you're coming to is extremely important. Being able to make that transition, being able to make sure that you go from a layback, easygoing flow of a story to becoming extremely serious, to bringing up the tension in the room a little bit. It's okay, it's not wrong. That tension in the room has to kind of go up and down. You use humor, it comes down, everyone is now relaxed, khalas, they have a good laugh. You can see all the kurush going up and down in happiness. But now you want to raise the tension and get everyone to really, those pupils to dilate and to listen. Going from one to the other is extremely important. And being able to make that transition. Again, vocalizing emotions is going to do that, right? Speed is going to do that. Tone, up and down, all that's going to help. But what I'm telling you is, as tips, if you understand how to use the rules that we talked about. Speed, vocalizing emotions, playing around with your tone a little bit, all that. Then you need to be able to go from humor to seriousness, to move back and forth so that people actually pay attention. The span of human attention today has decreased significantly, like significantly. I remember, let's just take it from music. Kulthum would stand there and go for an hour. A song's an hour, 3 minutes, tops. Right? Nothing more than that. That's just an art. Art has changed significantly. People used to listen to lectures for an hour, 2 hours. Now the lectures, I think the median is like maybe, they say that if you want something to be listened to, it has to be less than 10 minutes. Anything less than 10 minutes, if you put it online, you have a higher chance of people actually listening to it. But what can you possibly offer in 10 minutes? When it comes to something that actually has substance to it, it's very difficult to deliver something worthy of other people's attention in 10 minutes or less. It's doable if you have all these tools and you prepare properly. And I think that's why this series is important. We're coming to a time where you have to be an amazing public speaker to get a very small amount of people to pay attention to you. You have to be really high up there to get just a couple of people to listen. Back in the day, if you had a few of these tools, you were gold and you can go ahead. My dad tells me that he remembers when he was young that to the village, a guy called Al-Hakawati would come to the village. This is just a dude would come and sit down and the whole village would gather around for him to tell them made-up stories. Just stories. Because there was no radio, there was no internet, there was no TV, there was no phone, there was nothing. Books were hard to come by. There's nothing. So all you had is this guy who was going to tell you a story. People loved it. And they were known. This is al-Qussas or al-Wa'adh were a big part of human history. Now it's not the same. Now if you want people to listen, you really have to use all these tools and use them properly. Slang. Slang is important. Sometimes, especially for those who are going to do Arabic speaking. So in Arabic, there's Fusha and there's Ammiya. As a speaker, you should use Fusha. And if you're not good, then use Fusha Basita. What does that mean? Where you make the end of each letter second. جاء عمر فقال ذهبت. See? Sukoon on all of them. It's جاء عمر فقال ذهبت. That's how it's supposed to be. But if you're not comfortable, you're not sure, then you give sukoon to the last letter of every word. And that's what our teachers used to tell us. If you don't know, don't make a mistake. The moment you're on the minbar and something should have a dhamma, you give a fatha, that was the end of you. Maybe not here, but back home, ya latif. Sometimes people would be corrected on the minbar. And I witnessed once someone correcting someone while they were on the minbar. Unsub ya shaykh, unsub. Meaning there's supposed to be a fatha, not a dhamma. Unsub ya shaykh, he told them. These things happen. Here it's not as much of a problem, but I think it's still worth talking about. That yes, sometimes when you transition into slang, people listen. In English, you can speak proper English, and then you can maybe use a few words that people use in their daily interactions, or a certain age group or a certain group will use. It's not that they're rude or, it can't be profanity, obviously. You don't never use profanity in these type of talks ever. Wallahi. If it was possible, I would have done it, believe me, but it's not possible. I've tried many times. Doesn't work. I've tried everything. If you're capable of doing it, I will idolize you. I've tried to insert it, but it doesn't work. But slang is helpful. If you can get a word in that a certain group of people recognize and associate or relate to, then you can get their attention more than others. Which means you have to be a bit more, we all have to be a bit more educated about what's going on in the world around us. The Prophet ﷺ, for example, learned words from the Habashi language. And when the Muslims from Habasha came, he would use these words with them, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just to make them feel involved, to make them feel appreciated, to make them feel that they were relevant. In the hadith where he's talking to one of he's saying this is nice, فَقَالْ هَذِهِ سِنَةٌ, which means hasan, or good in Habashi language. So he had learned a few words so he could say, he didn't understand the language. They would come and speak to him in the language, he had no idea what they were saying, he needed a translator, but he would learn certain words. So learning slang or learning phrases that will help people relate to what you're saying is very, very helpful. Okay. The power of silence in public speaking. Public speaking is the art of this. It's the art of the pause. That's what public speaking is. It's the art of the pause, knowing when and how to stop. Now, you know I'm stopping for this, so it doesn't mean anything to you right now. But in a public speaking session, maybe in a khutbah Jummah, if you stop for a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, you get people thinking. You get people thinking, either wondering the importance of what you just said, anticipating what you're going to say, and giving people a moment to absorb what happened. The power of silence. Don't feel like you have to fill in every second of your public speaking with words. You don't feel compelled to do that. Knowing when to be silent and giving people a moment to absorb. I believe that in Jum'ah khutbah, the reason that he would sit sallallahu alaihi wasallam for a moment was that. Give everyone a second to absorb what they just heard. It wasn't just the concept of just sitting down and standing up and doing 2 khutbahs for 2 rak'ah. Not all scholars even agree that it has to be 2. But the concept of giving them a moment just to listen, just to think, listen to their own thoughts. Because when you're speaking, the people who are listening to you, they can't listen to their own thoughts. They can't listen to both. So they're listening to you. They're trying to stay focused. But that's not fair because they have a brain that is working in there, that is producing thoughts and questions. So you need to give them a moment so that they can listen to that for a second. The power of silence is a very powerful tool. Too much silence is awkward. Make sure that when you are showing, you're using silence, that it doesn't seem that you've forgotten what you're going to say. Even if you have, a good public speaker will be able to play silence so that people in front of them don't think, the audience doesn't think that this person forgot what's next. Because you will. You will definitely be standing and speaking, and then it's shift delete. There's nothing there, nothing. You come to this point, you know there's at least 10 minutes of material, but there's nothing. It didn't upload somehow. It's just not there. So you use the power of silence, but then you have to use it properly, and you have to make sure that it's not coming across as if you don't know what's coming next. It makes people feel very awkward. But silence is a blessing. And public speaking is a blessing. The art of the pause. The pause is just a matter of when you're talking about something, and you really want to emphasize an idea, so you use a flow, and just before that word, that very, very important word, you stop. Just for a few seconds. And then you say the word, then you stop, and you continue your flow. And that pause is good enough for everyone to continue to remember that word going forward within your talk and even afterwards. Just knowing. Don't use, never do that. Never stand here and say, no ums and no ever. If you forget and not sure, then just use the art of the pause. Just use the power of silence. Stop for a moment. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you pausing and being silent. Actually, as a public speaker, you should become comfortable with silence. If you're uncomfortable with silence, it can really make it difficult for you to actually deliver material properly. If you've ever do therapy, you'll sit there in a room with your therapist and they'll just sit there quietly. You'll feel very awkward, but they don't mind. You don't need to talk. They're completely happy with silence. Silence is fine. Silence is good. Silence is helpful. It gives you time to think. We're very rarely silent in our lives. You're like, no, I don't talk a lot. I know you don't talk a lot, but you're always doing something. It means there's always noise, physical noise or thought noise. There's always something going on. Silence is refreshing, and it gives everyone a chance to think for a few moments. So if you really want to try, I want you to try this. You can take any story and tell it without pauses, and then try and tell it with some pauses and silences. I'm not giving examples because we're going to do the examples, inshallah, in the practical part. Like I'll give you the examples because we'll be practicing all these things. So I'll give you an example. I'll show you how it's done both ways. But now I just want you to think about these concepts and understand that they're there. That this is a big part of what public speaking is. Being able to accept silence, use it for your advantage, to allow people to think about what you said, anticipate what is coming, or absorb what just happened, and then learn how to pause. Know when to stop, what to emphasize, and what to continuously move on quickly with. And that's really, in terms of vocal presentation, that's kind of everything that you need to know. All right, let's go quickly over over them, and then we'll let you go. So make sure you're not always high, make sure you're not always low, make sure you're not too loud, make sure you're not too sharp. You can use all of these. All of these are fine. You can go really low, you can go really high, you can get very sharp, you can be loud, but it has to be something that you are trying to use for a specific period of time to get an idea across, and then you regress back again. The rules: speed, vocalization of emotion, clarity, and tone. These 4 things have to be in your mind all the time, all 4. You have to have an answer. When you're speaking, okay, what is your speed? You have to have an answer for that. Am I trying to be quick? Am I trying to be slow? And is there a reason for me choosing what I'm going to do right now? When I'm the emotion that I have, do I have an emotion right now? Or do I not have an emotion? Am I vocalizing it with my voice, or am I not? Am I really happy? Am I really, really sad? Am I very angry? What am I? There has to be something coming out of your mouth that explains that people, even if they don't understand the language, or they missed a few of the words you said, they can still feel it through your vocalization. You have to be clear. Make sure that you pronounce. If you have problems with letters, take time to fix those letters. If you don't know how to pronounce a word, don't come and say it. I have like a little, there's a YouTube channel. All it does is just pronounces words. I want to talk about the hudhud a few weeks ago. I have no idea what a hudhud is in English. No idea. So I look it up. And the spelling gives me no clue of how to say this word. Like I just look at it like, what do I say? So actually I just go to the same, if you look it up on YouTube, you'll find it. And they pronounce it for you in the American and British accent. So it's hoopo and hoopoo. It works both ways. I didn't like hoopoo, it sounded dirty, so I stuck with hoopo. So, but anyways, you have to learn how to say the word properly so it actually comes across. And the tone. Your tone is important. You have to learn to change it, you have to learn to play around with it a little bit. So you have to have an answer. Every time you're talking, you have to have that answer. What is my speed? What emotion am I vocalizing? Am I clear? And what is my tone? These things have to be clear to you. Make sure you're diverse. Make sure that there's humor, that there's seriousness, and use slang occasionally whenever that's applicable. And finally, the art of the pause. Learn to use silence. Be comfortable with it. It's not a problem. It's actually helpful. I don't use it as much as I should. When I do my plugs, I know I don't use it. And the reason is that there's not enough time. There's never enough time. There's never enough time. So if I'm going to pause for a few seconds here and pause a few seconds, nothing will ever get done. And the Sirah Halaqah will take 15 years to finish. And the Khutbah Jum'ah, Dr. Muhammad will kick me out physically because I won't be able to finish. So, but using the pause, giving people time to actually accept and think and take a moment is very important and helpful. I hope that was beneficial, inshallah. We'll see you next week. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ashabihi ajma'in.